Nobody could control this wild German shepherd until a veteran stepped in with a stunning move. The night air in Redwood Pass tasted like metal, sharp and cold, the kind that clung to the lungs. The mountains stood dark against the sky, their shadows stretching across the quiet town like long, waiting hands. Most of the locals were asleep. Only the shelter lights were still on, buzzing weakly against the darkness. Inside the Redwood County Animal Center, chaos erupted. A German shepherd slammed into the chain-link panel hard enough to rattle the bolts. The officer in the hallway stumbled back, one hand raised instinctively, the other gripping his flashlight. He shouted, voice cracking, "Back up! Back up, damn it!" But the dog did not back up. Ranger's eyes were wide, pupils blown, pulling in every flicker of fluorescent light. His ears twitched violently with every echo, every scrape of metal. The air smelled of disinfectant and cold steel. His breath came in fast bursts, fogging the bars in front of him. The officer stepped forward again, thinking he could steady the situation. That was when Ranger lunged. It happened fast, like a shadow leaping off the wall. Teeth flashed. The officer's sleeve tore open as he stumbled backward, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Ranger's paws scraped against the kennel floor, claws digging for purchase, desperate to escape, desperate to fight something only he could see. Maya Collins, the young shelter tech on night shift, sprinted down the corridor. "Stop moving!" she yelled. "He's triggered. Don't make eye contact." But the officer was already scrambling to his feet, panic in every motion. He grabbed a catchpole, but the metal clanged against the wall, a loud, sharp sound that sliced through Ranger's nerves like lightning. The dog roared. Not a bark, not a growl. A sound purled from the edge of fear and memory. Maya managed to shut the kennel gate before Ranger could push through, but the dog hit the bars so violently they bowed inward. Someone's voice echoed from the lobby. "He's out of control! That animal's a danger!" Within minutes, 3 more officers arrived. One was already muttering about euthanasia policy. Another filmed the shredded uniform sleeve for evidence. And the story began to spread. By midnight, Redwood Pass had a new headline whispered across diner counters and police radios. The German shepherd nobody could control. But outside the shelter, just past the bend of Old Mill Road, an old blue pickup rolled slowly along the street. The engine hummed, steady and tired. Inside sat a man who had learned to keep his breathing quiet, as if silence itself could protect him. Elias Ward, 37, former K9 handler, former hero, former everything. For the past 12 years he had lived like a ghost in the mountains, a cabin, a dog grave, a folded flag, a life carved down to the bone. He wasn't driving anywhere in particular. Sometimes he just moved so he wouldn't feel dead. But tonight something cracked through the numbness. A sound carried through the open truck window. A sharp bark. A howl that wasn't just noise but something wounded. Something calling from a place Elias knew too well. His hands froze on the steering wheel. Another crash sounded. Metal scraping. He pressed the brake slowly, as if his body wasn't sure it had permission to react. Then another sound reached him. Not anger, not aggression. Panic. Elias inhaled sharply, a memory slicing through the night. Ghost thrashing under mortar fire, the ringing in his ears, the explosion of sand and fear. He blinked hard. The sound wasn't Ghost, but it was close enough to hurt. He sat in the truck a moment longer, jaw locked, breath heavy. Logic told him to drive away. He'd promised himself he would never step into anything K9 related again. Those doors were closed. But instinct wasn't listening. His hand moved to the gear shift before he consciously decided anything. The truck rolled backward, slow, tires crackling against gravel, turning toward the shelter's glowing windows. Inside, officers argued about sedatives. Maya stayed kneeling by the bars, whispering softly. "It's okay, buddy. You're okay. Just breathe." Ranger didn't hear her. His chest heaved, muscles trembling with adrenaline he couldn't shut off. His eyes darted toward the entrance as Elias stepped through the door. No one noticed him at first. He looked like any mountain local. Rough jacket, stubbled jaw, a man who carried storms quietly behind the eyes. Then Maya saw the way he froze, staring at the dog. "Sir, the lobby is closed. Are you here about the report?" Elias didn't answer, because Ranger had stopped moving. Not fully, not calm, but the wild thrashing stilled for a heartbeat. The shepherd's nose lifted, testing the air. Something in Elias shifted, almost painfully. He took one step forward. An officer snapped, "Sir, get back. That animal is unstable." But Ranger wasn't looking at the officers. His gaze locked on the stranger who smelled of pine, old leather, and something familiar buried deep beneath. Elias whispered under his breath, barely audible, "Easy, soldier." The officers turned sharply. "What did you call him?" Elias didn't answer. He kept his eyes on Ranger. The shepherd's mouth closed, his breathing eased by a fraction, head lowering not in surrender but in recognition, as if he knew that voice, as if something long dormant inside him had stirred. A low rumble rolled through the hallway, distant thunder over the peaks. The lights flickered. Ranger flinched hard at the sound, crashing into the back of the kennel. Chaos rose again, officers shouting. But Elias remained perfectly still. His voice cut clean through the noise. "If you want to save him, open the hallway gate." Everyone else steps back. Maya hesitated. "Why should we trust you?" Elias glanced at the trembling shepherd behind the bars. "Because he's not dangerous. He's scared, and someone here needs to know the difference." Maya stared at him, and in Ranger's eyes something flickered again. Not calm, not trust, but a memory of it. A seed. A beginning. Before anyone could stop her, Maya unlocked the hallway gate. And for the first time in 12 years, Elias stepped toward a dog that needed him. The mountain road curled upward like a cold breath rising through the pines. Elias Ward drove in silence, the truck's headlights cutting through the dark. His hands gripped the wheel too tightly. He had only been inside the shelter for a handful of minutes, barely long enough to say 3 sentences, but Ranger's eyes had followed him the entire walk out. Not with trust, not with fear, but with something hauntingly familiar. The kind of look Ghost used to give him when the world tilted too fast. Elias exhaled as the truck pulled into the clearing. His cabin sat alone on the ridge, slumped under tall Douglas firs, its wooden boards weathered by 12 years of storms. The porch light flickered, the bulb older than the memories he avoided. He stepped inside and shut the door behind him, letting the quiet settle. The place smelled of pine sap, old coffee, and loneliness. A single framed photo sat on the table. Everyone who visited here asked the same question. Why keep just one? Ghost stood next to him in the picture, younger and bright-eyed, a black and sable German shepherd with a tail that never stopped moving. Taken 2 months before Afghanistan. 2 months before the explosion. Elias's thumb brushed over the frame. He whispered, "I know. I shouldn't have gone back there." But the truth sat heavy in his chest. He hadn't gone back for them. He had gone back because something inside him wouldn't let him leave. He showered, ate without tasting the food, and tried to distract himself by chopping wood outside. But every swing of the axe echoed Ranger's howl earlier. Every time the blade struck the log, his heartbeat synced with the memory of that trembling dog behind the bars. A sudden flash tore across his mind. Ghost trapped under rubble, the roar of mortar fire, his own voice screaming for help that never came. The axe fell from his grip, his breath hitched. PTSD rose fast, sharp, a tide he knew too well. He sat on the stump, elbows on knees, grounding himself the way his therapist taught him years ago. Name 5 things around you. Feel the cold earth under your boots. Pull the air deep into your ribs. His breaths steadied after a long minute. The mountains returned, the night, the trees. But nothing stopped the image replaying in his mind, Ranger's frantic eyes locking onto his. Inside the shelter, the night had not gone quietly. Ranger struck the kennel wall again. The metal groaned. Officers had left. Maya stayed behind alone, against protocol, refusing to let him face the dark without someone nearby. She sat on the ground a few feet from his cage. Her knees pulled to her chest, speaking softly. "You're not bad. I don't care what they say. Something happened to you, didn't it?" Ranger paced, claws clicking on the concrete. Every time he passed the bars closest to Maya, he hesitated. His ears dipped, his tail twitched. But then a gust of wind rattled the window, sending him into another frantic spin. Maya tried again. "It's okay. You can lie down. No one's hurting you." But Ranger didn't lie down. He didn't rest. He didn't blink. He scanned the room with the posture of a soldier expecting ambush. Around 4 in the morning, he froze suddenly and growled at the far wall. Nothing was there. Nothing any human could hear or see. But to the shepherd, the ghosts of gunfire and memory were as real as the chain link in front of him. Maya swallowed hard. "Whatever happened to you? Must have been hell." Her phone vibrated in her pocket. A text from her supervisor. "Call the vet first thing in the morning. The council wants him put down." She stared at the words, her breath tight. Not yet. Not like this. She opened her contacts, scrolled, hesitated, then found the name she'd saved years ago but never dared call. Elias Ward, former USAF K-9 handler, former miracle worker, according to every trainer she'd ever met, and the man who had stood like stone tonight, as if the world couldn't tilt him. She pressed the call button. Back at the cabin, Elias lay awake in the dark, unable to escape the images hitting his mind in broken bursts. Sand, blood, ghosts whine, Ranger slamming into the bars, the way his muscles had trembled like he was fighting invisible hands. The phone rang once, twice. He almost ignored it. People didn't call him. People didn't even know he existed up here. The third ring cut through the silence, insistent. He answered quietly. "Ward." Maya's voice came in shaky. "I'm sorry to call this late. It's about the shepherd. Ranger." Elias rubbed his forehead. "He's not mine." "No, but he reacted to you. I've never seen anything like it." Elias sat up, tension pulling through his shoulders. That dog is traumatized. He needs rest. He needs someone who understands triggers. "Which is why I'm calling you," Maya said. "They want to euthanize him. Tomorrow." The room fell silent. Even the wind outside paused. Elias breathed out slowly. "He's not a lost cause. Tell them that. They won't believe me." Elias stiffened, and for a brief second, the old handler surfaced in his voice. "Then they're idiots. That dog isn't aggressive. He's reacting to something you're not seeing." Maya hesitated. "What happened to him, Elias?" He closed his eyes. Only one answer made sense. The scars, the reactions, the panic that wasn't rage but memory. He whispered it. "He's military. He's been through war." A clang echoed through Maya's phone. Ranger had jumped again, slamming his weight against the door hard enough to shake the frame. Maya gasped. "Please, I can't calm him. He hasn't slept once since intake. If they see him like this in the morning, he's gone." Elias stared at Ghost's photo, a lump forming in his throat. He had sworn never to go back into that world. Never again. Never another dog. Never another loss. But instinct didn't care about oaths. Before he could stop himself, he said, "I'll be there at sunrise." Maya's breath released all at once. "Thank you." Elias, you might be the only one who can save him. He hung up. The cabin returned to silence. The mountains breathed. The old grief curled at his feet like smoke. But something else moved beneath it. Not comfort, not hope. A pull, as if another wounded soul had reached out from the dark and grabbed the part of him he thought was dead. On the other side of town, Ranger finally stopped pacing. He stood facing the kennel door, ears forward, breathing heavier but calmer. A single thought, shaped not in words but in instinct, flickered inside him. The man from earlier, the one who didn't fear him. He lay down for the first time since arriving at the shelter. Not to sleep, but to wait. Sunrise came late in Redwood Pass, slipping slowly over the ridgelines as if unsure the town deserved its warmth. The shelter's metal roof glowed faint orange as Elias Ward stepped out of his truck. He hadn't slept. The mountain air clawed at his lungs, sharp and clean, the kind of cold that woke every old injury in his bones. Inside, Maya Collins paced the hallway, clutching a clipboard she wasn't reading. When she saw Elias, relief washed across her face. "Thank God. I didn't think you'd actually come." Elias nodded once. His voice stayed low. "How is he?" "Rough night." He tore the corner panel off the kennel. "It's reinforced steel. No dog's ever done that before." Elias's jaw tightened. "That means he's not trying to escape. He's trying to get away from something only he can hear." Maya unlocked the inner door and led him toward the back rooms. The deeper they walked, the more the shelter changed. It grew colder, quieter, the air heavier with fear and disinfectant. When they reached Ranger's corridor, even Maya hesitated. Ranger stood in the center of his kennel, chest rising and falling in shallow bursts. His eyes locked on Elias instantly, sharp and burning, as if he had been waiting. Maya whispered, "He hasn't looked at anyone like that. Not even me." Elias didn't speak. He stepped forward. The reaction was immediate. Ranger exploded toward the front panel, slamming into the bars with a force that rattled the concrete floor. His paws scraped wildly. Foam tipped his teeth. His growl wasn't a threat. It was a command, a warning born from 1,000 fractured memories. "Stand back," Maya hissed. "He'll break his neck if you—" But Elias didn't retreat. His breathing stayed steady, his expression unreadable. He watched Ranger closely, mapping every twitch, every shift of weight. Then he reached into his jacket pocket. What he pulled out wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a tranquilizer. It wasn't even meant for anyone else to see. A glove. Old, scuffed, military-issue leather. The kind a canine handler never threw away. Maya frowned. "What is that?" Elias didn't answer. He crouched slowly, letting Ranger see every controlled movement, then placed the glove gently on the concrete floor just beyond the bars. The moment it touched the ground, Ranger's entire body changed. Not gradually, not subtly, like a switch had been thrown deep inside him. The shepherd froze mid-lunge, his claws still gripping the bars. His nostrils twitched, his tail dropped, his growl died in his throat. He sniffed again, harder this time, the scent unlocking something buried beneath fear and instinct. Maya whispered, "What's happening?" Elias's voice carried an old ache. "He knows what that is." Ranger stepped back once, then again, until he was no longer pressing against the front panel. His gaze darted between Elias and the glove, confused but desperate. His ears twitched, his breathing slowed. His entire posture changed from attack to something closer to recognition. Maya exhaled shakily. "He's remembering." Elias didn't break eye contact with the dog. Not remembering. Reconnecting. That smell means something to him, something strong. Maya moved to her desk and grabbed a handheld scanner. "There's something else you need to see." I didn't want to believe it at first. She unlocked the safety latch and extended the device through the bars. Ranger backed up farther, not in fear but in obedience, as if conditioned to respond to equipment being placed near him. Maya scanned the left side of his neck. A beep sounded. She pulled back and looked at the small screen. Her voice dropped. "Elias, he has a military microchip. He's registered as an MWD, military working dog." Elias finally looked away from Ranger. "What unit?" The scanner blinked. "Code 9SF. That's Air Force Security Forces, right?" Elias felt the world tilt for a moment. His throat tightened. That was his unit, years ago, before everything fell apart. He said quietly, "Who was his handler?" Maya tapped the screen. "Classified. His file is locked. Only someone with military clearance could access it." Ranger paced again, but it wasn't frantic now. It was purposeful. He circled the glove, stopping several times to sniff the air, head lifting toward Elias as if searching for confirmation. Maya crouched beside Elias. "What do you think happened to him?" Elias spoke slowly, each word wrapped in a weight he rarely shared. "PTSD. Severe trauma, maybe a blast injury, maybe losing his handler. Dogs like him don't break without reason. Something hit him hard enough to shatter everything he knew." Maya swallowed. "Can't you help him?" Elias didn't answer. Not because he didn't know, but because he did. Ranger suddenly startled, jerking his head toward the far wall. Loud pop sounded in the distance, a car backfiring outside. He lunged again, but only halfway, as if instinct told him to attack, while memory begged him to stand down. Elias's words cut through the tension. "That reaction is military. He's not trying to hurt anyone. He's responding to triggers, explosions, commands, flashbacks." Maya stared through the bars. "So he's not dangerous." Elias met her eyes. "He's dangerous because he's terrified. If he weren't trained, he'd shut down. But he's trained to fight through fear. That's what makes him unpredictable." Maya hesitated. "There's something else." She pulled a file from her pocket. His intake report. The men who trapped him before he got here said he was found wandering near an abandoned ranger station in the mountains. They thought he belonged to hunters. But they said something strange. That he kept returning to the same spot, as if he was guarding something. Elias stood straighter. Guarding what? No one knows. They didn't check. Ranger suddenly pressed his forehead against the bars, not aggressively, but with a soft, trembling push. His eyes locked onto Elias again, and something raw flickered behind them. A plea, a question, a warning. Maya whispered, "He trusts you. I don't know why, but he does." Elias crouched slowly, picking up the glove. Ranger watched every inch of the movement but didn't lunge, didn't growl, didn't back away. Elias held the glove near the bars. "Tell me what happened to you, soldier." Ranger took one step forward and touched his nose to the metal. Then, in a moment that stunned both of them, he let out a soft, broken sound. Not a growl, not a bark, a whine, low, trembling, like the sound of a memory resurfacing. Elias felt something shift inside his chest, a crack in the walls he'd built around his past. Maya whispered, "There's something he wants you to know. Something he can't show anyone else." Ranger stepped back again, gaze steady, ears tense, as if telling Elias the same truth Maya had just voiced. A secret was buried somewhere behind those trembling eyes, and the only person he would reveal it to was the veteran who carried the same wounds. The morning fog hung low over Redwood Pass, settling along the valley like a blanket that refused to lift. Elias Ward sat alone on the tailgate of his truck behind the shelter, a folder resting on his knees. The papers inside were yellowed, some creased, some torn at the edges. His old military files. Records he hadn't touched in more than a decade. Records he once swore he would burn. But now he needed them. Maya stood a few feet away, unsure if she should speak. Elias wasn't an easy man to interrupt. His silence had weight, like a stone dropped into deep water. Finally, he opened the folder. The first page bore a familiar stamp. 9th Security Forces Squadron. His unit, his past, Ghost's life, Ghost's death. The next page held something new. MWD Ranger. Status: Active Specialization, Detection and Protection, Handler, Sergeant Kyle Mercer. Mission classified, last recorded location, Forward Operating Base. Orion Elias exhaled slowly. Mercer. He remembered the name. A young handler assigned after Elias stepped away from deployment rotations. Quiet, hard-working. A man who relied more on instinct than protocol, the kind of handler dogs bonded deeply with. He looked at Ranger through the window. The shepherd paced slowly in the kennel, not frantic like before, but uneasy. His ears flicked at every sound, every click, every hum. Maya stepped up beside him. So he really was one of yours? Elias shook his head. Not mine, but he served in the same sand, the same heat, the same nightmares. Maya leaned closer to the file. Do you think this has to do with his handler dying? Elias didn't answer. He flipped through more pages. Ranger's medical charts were missing. His deployment timeline cut off abruptly. No notes on discharge, no signatures, like someone removed the last chapter of his life. Maya frowned. Why would they hide this? Elias closed the folder. Because hiding things is easier than explaining them. A sudden pounding noise echoed from inside the shelter. Ranger slammed his body into the back wall, claws scraping the floor. Elias stood instantly. What triggered him? Maya watched helplessly as Ranger whirled around the kennel, panting hard. Nothing. No one touched him. He just reacted. Elias listened. A distant siren carried across the town, its pitch rising, then fading. That, he murmured. That's what set him off. The siren. Elias nodded, eyes still fixed on the dog. In the field, sirens meant medevac, casualties, chaos. If he lost his handler during an air evacuation, that sound is burned into his mind. Maya's face fell. So he's reliving it. Again and again, without understanding why. Inside, Ranger pressed his body against the far corner, shaking. His eyes weren't wild this time. They were pleading, searching for an exit that wasn't there. Elias lowered his voice. This isn't aggression. This is survival. When triggers hit him, his mind goes straight back to the moment he lost everything. Maya whispered, "Just like you." Elias stiffened. He didn't expect her to say it out loud. She stepped back quickly, but the truth lingered between them. Inside the kennel, Ranger slowly lay down, exhausted. His heavy breathing fogged the cold floor. His tail curled protectively around himself. Elias spoke quietly. I need to know exactly what happened to Sergeant Mercer. There's a part of Ranger's past that doesn't add up. Maya nodded. I can check military databases, but without clearance. I have someone. Elias cut in. He stood, brushing dirt from his jacket. I'll make a call. He walked outside, the wind tugging at his sleeves. Maya watched him from the doorway. He wasn't just investigating Ranger's past. He was digging into his own. Elias dialed a number he hadn't used in years. Colonel Harris, Rhett, his former commanding officer. The call clicked. A rough voice answered. Ward, didn't expect to hear from you again. I need information, Elias said, about a handler named Kyle Mercer and his dog, MWD Ranger, 9th Squadron. A long silence stretched across the line. Then Harris spoke quietly. Where did you hear that name? Elias glanced toward the shelter window where Ranger lay curled. He's here, in Redwood Pass. Another silence. Ward. Mercer's team never made it back. The mission was compromised. The reports were sealed. Ranger was listed missing in action. Missing. not dead. A heavy breath came through the line. We assumed he was gone, especially after what? Harris hesitated. After what they found at the blast site. There were signs. Ranger didn't just witness Mercer's death. He tried to drag him out. They found blood trails, claw marks. The dog fought until he collapsed. No one knows how he survived that long alone in the desert. Then he disappeared. Elias closed his eyes. Ranger had tried to save his handler. He hadn't failed. He had fought until he physically couldn't anymore. "Colonel," Elias said softly, "do you know what triggered the ambush?" "Only partly. But it wasn't the dog's fault." Elias opened his eyes. Ghost's memory pressed against him hard. Harris continued, "Ward, whatever Ranger is going through, it's not just trauma. That dog saw something he wasn't supposed to see. That's why the files are sealed." Elias's pulse tightened. "What did he see?" "That's classified." He hung up before Elias could respond. Maya stepped outside just as Elias lowered the phone. "What did you find out?" Elias didn't answer right away. The truth hit him like cold rain. Ranger hadn't failed his handler, just like Ghost hadn't died because of him. Two souls carrying guilt that never belonged to them. He finally spoke. Ranger didn't just lose Mercer. He tried to save him. And whatever happened wasn't an accident. Maya swallowed hard. "So there's more to this than PTSD." Elias nodded. "A lot more." The wind picked up, carrying the faint echo of a siren from somewhere far down the valley. Ranger lifted his head inside the kennel, ears twitching, eyes darting towards the sound. But this time, he didn't panic. He looked toward the window instead, toward Elias. Two lives shattered in different deserts, two ghosts pressing against the same locked door, and for the first time, Elias felt something shift in the space between them, a shared wound, and a beginning neither of them expected. The shelter office smelled of burnt coffee and old paper when Maya burst through the door, face pale, breath shaking. Elias was already inside, reviewing Ranger's incomplete deployment files. The moment he saw her expression, he knew something had gone terribly wrong. Maya held a single sheet of paper in her trembling hand. They signed it. She whispered. "Signed what?" Her voice cracked. "The euthanasia order, effective immediately." Elias stood so fast his chair scraped hard across the floor. "On what grounds? Multiple attacks? Liability concerns?" Officer Harper made a formal complaint. "Administration says Ranger's too unpredictable to rehabilitate." Elias snatched the paper from her hand. The bold letters hit him like a punch. "Euthanize. Ranger, German Shepherd, 4 years old." He read it twice, jaw tightening more each time. His voice dropped to a low, dangerous growl. "This isn't a dog problem. This is a leadership problem." Maya swallowed hard. "Elias, they gave me until tonight to prepare him. They want it done before sunrise, so there's no public attention." He felt something hot rise in his chest. Not just anger. Something older. Something that tasted like guilt and war and memories he had buried under 12 years of silence. "No," he said. "Not happening." Maya's breath hitched. "What do we do?" Elias didn't hesitate. "Bring me to him." They walked down the hallway together, the fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like angry insects. Ranger paced in the kennel, tense, restless. But the moment Elias appeared, the shepherd froze, ears pricking, muscles tight. "He knows," Maya whispered. "I swear he can sense the tension in the building." Elias stepped closer. "Dogs like him always know when death is coming." Ranger took a slow step toward the bars, eyes locked on the man who seemed to understand things no one else could see. His breathing softened, his posture lowered. Not submissive, not fearful, recognizing, choosing. Behind them, the shelter director, Mr. Hargrove, entered with a stack of forms. "Ward, whatever you're doing, stop. This dog is done." The council made their decision. Elias turned. "Then unmake it." Hargrove scoffed. "You don't get to bark orders here. Ranger attacked an officer. He's a danger to everyone in this building." Elias stepped forward, shoulders squared. "And how many of you know what a trigger stack is? Or a trauma response pattern? Or the difference between an aggressive dog and a military-trained shepherd reliving a battlefield?" Silence. No one answered because no one knew. Hargrove tried again. "The decision is final." Elias leaned in, voice steady and sharp. "Give me 5 days." Hargrove blinked. 5 days, just 5. If by then he shows no improvement, I'll walk him into the room myself. Maya grabbed Elias's arm. "Don't say that. Don't you dare." He didn't look away from Hargrove. "But if he improves, you cancel the order and you give him a chance at real evaluation. Military evaluation. Not this." The staff murmured. Some doubtful, some hopeful, all watching. Hargrove hesitated. "Why 5 days?" "Because that's how long it takes to break through trauma patterns. That's how long it took for my K9 after his first blast injury. And because this dog still has something left in him. I can feel it." Hargrove folded his arms. "You're making promises you can't keep." "Maybe, but at least I'm trying." The room went still. Finally, Hargrove exhaled. 5 days. Starting now. But if anything else happens, nothing will happen, Elias said. He turned back toward the kennel. In that moment, something shifted in the air. Ranger stood perfectly still, eyes locked on Elias. The shepherd's chest rose slowly. His ears lowered, not out of fear, but out of recognition, like a memory surfacing. Elias crouched just outside the door. "Come here, soldier." Maya whispered a warning. He's never approached anyone willingly. But Ranger moved, cautious at first, steps slow, muscles trembling with uncertainty. Then suddenly he closed the distance in 3 strides. Staff gasped, stepping back, expecting an attack. But Ranger did something no one predicted. He lowered his head and placed it gently onto Elias's knee. The room froze. Not a sound, not a breath. Even the lights seemed to stop buzzing. Elias didn't move, afraid the moment would shatter. Ranger stayed there, eyes half closed, breath warm against Elias's leg. A posture that was not submission. It was trust, or something deeper. Recognition of a kindred soul. Maya covered her mouth, tears welling. Oh my God. Elias slowly lifted a hand. He didn't touch Ranger yet. He waited, gave the dog time to make the choice himself. Ranger leaned in, pressing the side of his face against Elias's palm, trembling but hopeful. Hargrove whispered, stunned, How did he do that?" Elias didn't look away from Ranger. "Because he's not broken. He's wounded. And there's a difference." Ranger let out a soft, aching sound, a whine that wasn't fear or pain, but relief. A sound of finally finding someone who understood the weight he carried. Elias whispered, "You fought for your handler, didn't you? And now you're still fighting alone." Ranger's breathing steadied, his tail barely twitching once in a subtle, fragile motion. The staff stared, speechless. Hargrove finally managed, 5 days, and God help you both. Ranger lifted his head, eyes bright, alive with something new. Hope, maybe even purpose. Elias felt Ghost's memory settle inside him, no longer a wound but a guide. 2 souls, both carrying blame they never deserved. And for the first time in years, Elias felt the beginning of something he thought was gone forever. A second chance. Not just for Ranger, for both of them. The sky over Redwood Pass turned the color of bruised steel as Elias stepped into the training yard with Ranger at his side. 5 days. That was all the shelter had given him. But after the moment Ranger rested his head on Elias's knee, everything had shifted. The dog was still wounded, still skittish, but now he watched Elias with the alert, searching gaze of someone trying to understand the rules of a language he once knew. Elias held a training leash loosely in his hand, not clipped to Ranger's collar. Sahar wanted trust, not control. Ranger circled him twice, sniffing the air, ears flicking at distant thunder. Storm clouds rolled in faster than expected. Maya stepped outside, tightening her jacket. Weather report says a severe thunderstorm. Maybe we should stop. Elias shook his head. No, this might be the moment he breaks through, or breaks down. Ranger stopped near Elias, staring at him with eyes that carried ghosts. Suddenly, the shelter gate slammed open. Deputy Harper stormed in, boots splashing through the rising puddles. Ward, step back from the animal. Elias didn't move. What do you think you're doing here? Harper placed a hand on his holster. Following the law. That dog ripped my arm open. The council may have stalled his euthanasia, but I didn't sign off on anything. He's still a danger. And I'm not waiting to get mauled again. Maya stepped between them. Deputy Harper, you need to leave. Elias is working with him. He cut her off sharply. Working with him, or trying to protect him for your own guilt? Elias stiffened. This isn't about guilt. It's about understanding what happened. Harper snorted. What happened is simple. The mutt snapped. End of story. Lightning cracked across the sky. A second later, thunder exploded through the mountains like artillery fire. Ranger froze, his pupils dilated. Another boom! Another shudder in the ground. Ranger's legs tensed beneath him. He backed up, head lowering, breath quickening. Not growling, not aggressive, panicking. Elias whispered, Ranger, look at me. But the next thunderclap hit like a bomb. Ranger bolted, slamming through the gate, knocking a trash bin aside as he sprinted into the storm and toward the dense timberline. Maya gasped. No, 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 no! Harper cursed, grabbed his gun, and took off after him. If he comes near anyone again, I'm putting him down. Elias ran after them. Harper, stop! That's not a request! The storm broke open completely. Sheets of rain fell in blinding waves. Wind clawed at the trees like something alive. But Ranger didn't run blindly. He moved with purpose, weaving through the woods as if following a path only he could see. His paws thudded against the wet earth with desperate rhythm. Maya called from behind, voice trembling. Why is he running there? What's in the mountains? Elias didn't slow. Not what's there, what used to be there. Harper shouted over the storm. He's running wild. He's unpredictable. We can't track him in this. Elias pushed past him. He's not running away. He's running back. Harper frowned. Back to what? Elias stopped for half a second, breath heaving. The place where Sergeant Mercer died. Harper's expression changed, like he'd been slapped with a truth he didn't want to believe. Lightning lit the ridge again. Ranger was a dark blur against the storm, heading deeper into the wild terrain. The forest here was steep, dotted with old mining tunnels and forgotten trails. Dangerous even on a clear day, deadly in a storm. Elias turned to Maya. Go back to the shelter. Call search and rescue. Tell them Ranger is heading toward Old Ridgepoint Mine. She shook her head violently. I'm not leaving you. But Elias's voice had the kind of command she had only heard in soldiers who'd lived through hell. Now, Maya, that dog needs someone who remembers what it feels like to be trapped between past and present. You'll only slow me down. She hesitated, tears mixing with rain, then nodded. Bring him back. Elias took off. Harper followed, gun still drawn. If he attacks again, I'm firing. Elias didn't look back. Then you'd better pray he doesn't think you're the enemy. The mountain trail twisted sharply upward. Mud slid beneath their boots. Branches whipped their faces. Thunder shook the ground so violently Harper swore under his breath. Then they saw it, a trail of deep paw prints, more deliberate now, leading straight toward a collapsed ravine. Harper raised his gun cautiously. "Ward, he's cornered up there. You go first. If he lunges, You'll lower the damn gun." Elias snapped. "You point that at him again, and you'll be the one causing the attack." Another explosion of thunder echoed, but this one triggered something different in Elias. A flash, a memory, ghost, sand, the smell of burning metal, the scream of incoming mortar fire. Elias forced himself to breathe. Not now. He climbed the last slope and saw Ranger standing near the entrance of an old mining shaft, half collapsed and swallowed by shadow. Ranger stood perfectly still in the rain, staring into the darkness. Elias whispered, "He remembers this place." Harper frowned. Why would he remember a mine? Because that's where Mercer's extraction team tried to take shelter during the ambush. Elias said softly, "The sirens, the blast, the echoes, everything leads back here." As if hearing his name spoken through time, Ranger looked over his shoulder. Not at Harper, not at the storm, at Elias. Recognition, fear, needing something he couldn't explain. At that exact moment, the ground trembled. The weakened opening of the mine cracked. Ranger barked sharply, not aggressive, but warning them. Elias's heart dropped. He's not running to hide, he's running to lead. Harper blinked. Lead where? Elias looked into the darkness of the mine. Cold air poured out of it like breath from the earth. "To the truth," he whispered. Lightning flashed again, illuminating Ranger's face. Not wild, not broken, guiding. The twist hit Elias like a strike of lightning itself. Ranger wasn't fleeing his past, he was retracing it. Harper finally holstered his gun. What the hell is going on with that dog? Elias stepped toward the mine, rain running down his face, voice steady despite the storm. He's not dangerous. He's remembering something everyone else forgot. Ranger barked once, sharp, urgent, and disappeared into the darkness. Elias followed, and the mountain swallowed them both. The storm swallowed the mountain whole. Wind screamed between the pines like something wounded, bending branches until they cracked under their own weight. Thunder rolled low across the ridge, echoing in the cavern where Elias and Ranger had disappeared moments earlier. Deputy Harper pushed through the last thicket, breath ragged, gun holstered now. The forest was pitch black except for the jagged streaks of lightning that tore open the sky. He reached the collapsed ravine just as Ranger's silhouette appeared on a narrow outcropping above him. The shepherd barked sharply, pacing the ledge, tail stiff and trembling. Not fear. Urgency. Harper shouted up into the storm, "Ward, where are you?" A faint voice answered beneath the wind. "Down here." Harper climbed closer, boots sliding on the slick stone. When he reached the edge, he looked down, and his stomach flipped. A narrow crevice yawned 20 feet below. Rock walls sloped inward, forming a natural funnel. Elias stood halfway down, bracing himself against the rock, looking into the darkness below. There was movement, a faint groan. Another human voice. Harper blinked. "You've got to be kidding me." Elias called up, "There's someone down here, and alive." Lightning struck somewhere behind them, shaking the ground. A shower of pebbles rained down into the crevice. Ranger barked, tail whipping, eyes locked not on Elias, but past him, deeper into the shadows. Harper knelt beside the edge. "Ranger led us to a crash site." Elias nodded once. "This wasn't a mine collapse. This was a fall. Maybe years ago." Another rumble of thunder rolled over them, closer this time. The storm was climbing the mountain fast. Rain hit the rocks with sharp, stinging force. The crevice filled with mist. Harper stepped back, trying to anchor himself against the sudden vertigo. We need rope. Elias reached for his pack, still on his shoulders. Already have it. He uncoiled the rope with practiced hands, looping it through a metal ring on a nearby boulder. His movements were precise, automatic, the muscle memory of a man who had tied rescue lines under fire. Harper hesitated. You can't go down there alone. The storm will cut the visibility to nothing. Elias's jaw tightened. That man down there didn't crawl into this ravine by choice, and he sure as hell won't climb out alone. He cinched the rope to his harness. Ranger gave a low, rumbling whine. It wasn't fear. It was the same sound Ghost used to make before Elias deployed into danger. A warning. A plea. Elias reached up and rested a hand on Ranger's shoulder. I know, buddy, but we finish what we start. Then the earth shifted beneath their feet. Harper stumbled, hands flying up to catch himself. The edge crumbled, stone giving way under the weight of the storm. Before he could recover, he slipped. His body pitched forward, arms flailing, boot catching nothing but air. Elias lunged, grabbing the rope with one hand and Harper's forearm with the other. Harper slammed sideways into the wall of the ravine, choking on dust and rainwater. Elias grunted under the strain, boots skidding dangerously close to the collapsing lip. Harper, hold on! Harper's voice came out strangled. Pull me up! Don't let go! The storm answered with a deafening blast of thunder. Elias braced, digging his heels into the mud. I'm not letting you fall. Above them, Ranger sprinted back and forth along the edge, barking in frantic bursts. He lowered his chest to the ground and stretched his paws toward the rope, as if urging Elias upward. Elias slowly hauled Harper toward the surface, inch by inch. Every tug felt like lifting a truck through quicksand. But Harper finally reached the ledge, scrambling onto stable ground, gasping. Elias exhaled, but relief lasted only a second. A faint cry rose from below. Help! God! Someone help! Elias looked down. We're coming. Harper crawled to his knees, shaken. What if it's a false lead, Ward? What if there's no one alive down there? Elias gave him a look that cut through the storm. Then Ranger wouldn't have brought us here. As if proving him right, Ranger stepped to the edge, lowered his head, and began performing a precise sequence of motions. Shoulders down, left paw forward, head tilt. Quiet, measured whine. It was so exact, so fluid. Harper froze. Is that? Elias finished the thought. A trained rescue signal. He's indicating a live victim and requesting handler direction. Harper stared at the shepherd, stunned. But he attacked me. Ranger barked once, not at Harper, at the rope. Elias understood instantly. He wasn't attacking you. You were the trigger. Ranger stepped forward, nudging the rope with his nose, then looked straight into Elias's eyes. Elias clipped the rope around his harness again. Ranger wants me to follow him in. Harper shook his head. Ward, this is insane. One wrong move and the whole damn ravine collapses. Elias tightened the knot. He's been trying to show us something from the beginning. Tonight, he's finally able to. Ranger barked again, short and commanding. Elias lowered himself over the edge. The rope slid against wet stone as he descended. Rainwater streamed down the walls, turning the rock into slick glass. Ranger paced above, watching every movement, tail tight, breathing fast. 20 feet down, Elias felt a ledge under his boots. He leaned closer. A man lay wedged between two slabs of rock, soaked unconscious, his leg pinned under debris. Elias called out, We've got a survivor. Adult male, breathing shallow. Harper's voice echoed down, soft and disbelieving. Jesus, how long has he been here? Lightning cracked, illuminating the cavern for a split second. Long enough for Ranger to remember him. Elias whispered. The truth hit him as hard as the storm. This wasn't a random rescue. This was a memory, wound frozen in time. Elias tightened his harness, steadying himself. "Ranger, bring the pack!" Above, Ranger grabbed the small medical pouch with his jaws, carried it to the edge, and nudged it toward Harper until the deputy finally understood and lowered it by rope. Elias caught it, began working on the survivor, checking his airway, stabilizing the leg, clearing debris. Suddenly the ground trembled again. Rocks shifted. The ravine groaned like something alive. Harper shouted, "Ward, hurry! The ridge is collapsing!" Elias braced himself. Not leaving him. Not this time. Ranger barked again, louder, more urgent. Elias looked up. The shepherd wasn't panicking, he wasn't confused, he was directing. Not a wild dog, not a lost soldier, a rescuer. Elias felt something tighten in his chest. Ghost would have been proud of you, buddy. Ranger stood firm at the edge, rain pouring over him, tail still, gaze locked on Elias. And for the first time since this nightmare journey began, Harper finally said it out loud. "He's not the monster I thought he was." The storm swallowed the words, but Elias heard them. And somewhere, deep in the ravine, the man trapped beneath the rocks breathed a little easier, because Ranger had found him. And this time, Elias wasn't going to lose another soul. The hospital in Redwood Pass smelled of antiseptic and stale coffee. The storm had passed hours ago, leaving the world washed clean. But inside the small mountain emergency ward, silence clung to everything like a thin layer of frost. Harper stirred first. He blinked up at the ceiling, disoriented, trying to remember how he'd ended up on a hospital bed with an IV in his arm and half his clothes covered in mountain dust. When he turned his head, he froze. Ranger lay curled on the floor beside him, chest rising and falling steadily, eyes closed. Sleeping. Peaceful. Like a child who had finally outrun a nightmare. Harper's breath caught in his throat. The last time he'd looked into those eyes, they'd been full of panic and pain. Tonight they held something he couldn't name, something that made the edges of his convictions soften. Elias stepped into the room, boots still muddy, jacket torn at the shoulder. He looked exhausted, but alive, and relieved. "You're awake," he said quietly. Harper shifted, wincing at the bruises along his ribs. "Barely. You dragged me out of a grave." Elias shook his head. "Ranger did that. I just followed his lead." Harper's gaze drifted to the dog again. "I saw it. The way he acted on that ridge. That wasn't instinct. That was training. Purpose." Elias leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "He wasn't attacking you. He reacted to the moment, to fear, to triggers you didn't see coming." Harper swallowed. "I misread him." Then he clenched his jaw, something twisting inside him. "No. I condemned him." Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. The door opened, and the Chief Alvarez entered. A wide man, with shoulders like concrete pillars and a face that hadn't smiled genuinely in a decade. But tonight his expression was different, less rigid, more human. "Ward." "Harper." Elias straightened. Harper attempted to sit fully upright, but winced and abandoned the effort. Alvarez pulled a folded document from his pocket. The euthanasia order. He stared at it for a long moment, then tore it cleanly in half. Then again. Then a third time. Harper closed his eyes. Alvarez dropped the pieces into a trash bin and exhaled. "After tonight, after what that dog did, I'd be out of my mind to put him down. He saved a man's life, saved Harper's life, and he led your entire rescue effort like he'd been waiting to finish one last mission." Elias felt something loosen in his chest. "Thank you, Chief." Alvarez lifted his chin. "He's earned his chance. But so have you, Ward." Elias looked confused. "What do you mean?" Alvarez stepped closer. 12 years hiding in those mountains. 12 years carrying Ghost's death like a sentence. You don't deserve that burden anymore. The report on that mission finally came through the declassified channels. Elias stiffened, pulse jumping. What report? Alvarez handed him a thin folder. Ghost wasn't killed because of a mistake. He took the blast meant for you. He saved your entire unit. That's the truth. The rest, the rumors, that wasn't on you. Elias's throat tightened. I should have— No! Alvarez's voice was firm. Ghost made a choice. And you honored it by surviving. Elias stared at the folder as though it weighed 50 pounds. The guilt he'd carried like armor cracked, letting warmth push through the cold hollow inside him. He inhaled slowly, letting the truth settle where pain had lived too long. Harper watched him, then murmured, "No wonder Ranger chose you." Elias blinked. "Chose me?" Harper nodded. "Dogs like this. They find the wounded ones, the ones who need saving as much as they need to save. He saw something in you before any of us did." Elias knelt beside Ranger. The shepherd stirred, ears twitching, then lifted his head. For a moment, he looked uncertain, like he was waking in a world that had only ever hurt him. Elias reached out a slow hand. Ranger didn't flinch this time. He leaned into the touch. A soft rumble settled in his chest. Not a growl, a sigh. Harper whispered, "That's the first time I've heard him rest." Outside, dawn crept over the mountains, brushing the windows with pale gold. Maya rushed into the doorway, breathless. "The man from the ravine. He's stable. They say he might actually make it." Harper managed a tired smile, because Ranger wouldn't quit. Maya kneeled beside the dog, scratching behind his ear gently. Ranger closed his eyes again, melting into the floor with a slow exhale. It felt like the entire room exhaled with him. Alvarez cleared his throat. "He'll have to be evaluated, but as far as this department is concerned, Ranger's not a wild dog anymore. He's a survivor, and this town owes him more than we can measure." Maya nodded vigorously. "He deserves a home, not a cage, and not a label he never earned." Elias looked down at Ranger, brushing a hand through his rain-damp fur. "He can stay with me, if he wants to." Ranger lifted his head, pressed his nose against Elias's wrist, then rested it there with full weight. Decision made. Alvarez stepped back. "I'll make the paperwork vanish. Consider him officially cleared." Harper looked at Elias, voice low. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry. For all of it." Elias met his eyes. "Then we move forward, all of us." Harper nodded once, a soldier's nod. "Deal." The storm outside softened to a distant murmur. The mountains glowed with the early light. Redwood Pass felt quieter than it had in years. Ranger stretched out, finally settling into a deep, unbroken sleep at Elias's feet, his first peaceful rest in a very long time. Elias watched him breathe, the rise and fall steady, reassuring. For the first time in 12 years, he felt himself breathe that way too. Spring arrived late in Redwood Pass, sliding down from the mountains in slow, quiet breaths. Snow melted from the pines, revealing damp earth beneath. The town, small and tucked into the ridgeline like a secret, began to stir with the first warm days in months. And for the first time in years, Elias Ward felt something stir with it. The old ranger station on Pine Hollow Road had been abandoned for nearly a decade. Windows cracked, paint peeling. The radio tower rusted halfway through. It was the kind of building people drove past without remembering it existed. Today, it was alive. Maya stood on a ladder, painting over the faded letters on the wall. Veterans and K-9 Recovery Project, Redwood Pass, Colorado below the sign. Ranger sat in the dirt, chest puffed out, tail thumping slowly as he watched Elias bring in another crate of training equipment. Maya laughed down at him. He knows this place is his. Elias set the crate down. It's ours, but yes, he acts like he built it. Ranger gave a low bark, as if offended they'd even questioned it. Inside the building, several volunteers, retired medics, young vet techs, local ranchers, were clearing out old debris, replacing flooring, and setting up kennels. But these weren't cages. They were open enclosures with soft lighting, calming scents, and exit pathways designed for dogs with anxiety. Maya walked beside Elias, brushing dust from her hands. We already have 18 sign-ups, 10 veterans, 8 rescue dogs with trauma backgrounds. Elias nodded, scanning the space. They're going to need patience, and structure, and time. Maya looked at him. So did you. And Ranger. Elias didn't answer at first. He watched Ranger move across the room, checking every corner, sniffing every new object, eyes alert but calm. Not the frantic scanning he used to do, not the fear-driven pacing. This was different, purposeful, steady, present. Maya added softly, "They're going to follow his lead, whether you realize it or not." Elias smiled faintly, though there was still something fragile in the expression. He's the reason this place works, not me. He paused. You know, if someone told me 6 months ago I'd be back in the world again, running a program like this, I would have laughed them out of the room. Maya leaned on the railing. And now? Elias watched Ranger approach an ex-Marine named Colton Hayes, a man with a heavy limp and haunted eyes. Ranger slowed, circled once, then pressed his shoulder into Colton's thigh, gentle, deliberate. Colton froze. Elias held his breath. Then the Marine's hardened face softened, just a fraction. His hand moved, hesitant, then settled on Ranger's back. Ranger stood still as stone. Elias said quietly, "Now I think maybe this was supposed to happen." Maya smiled. "I think he chose you long before you chose him." The afternoon sun dipped behind the ridge, spilling long shadows across the training yard. Volunteers finished their tasks, the veterans gathered near the fire pit, talking in low voices, bonding through shared fractures in their lives. Ranger lay near them, head up, listening, guarding without guarding, present without demanding. He wasn't the terror of the shelter anymore. He wasn't the broken MWD consumed by memory. He was the bridge. Chief Alvarez dropped by near dusk, hands in his coat pockets. "Place looks good, Ward. Town Council approved your grant. People are talking about this program all over the county." Elias shook his hand. "Appreciate it, Chief." Alvarez nodded toward Ranger. "And that dog, he's become something of a legend." Maya laughed softly. "Not a legend, a symbol." Alvarez agreed. A symbol this town desperately needed. As evening settled, the veterans and volunteers gathered around the fire pit. The temperature dropped fast. Mountain cold always returned with the night. Elias set down blankets. Maya passed out mugs of hot cider. Colton Hayes stared into the fire, voice low. "I haven't slept through a night in years, not one. But when that dog leaned on me today, it felt like something shifted." Another veteran spoke up. "Yeah, like he understands without needing words." Elias looked at Ranger lying beside them, golden firelight dancing in his fur, eyes half closed but alert. Maya said, "He does understand, because he lived it." Elias added, "And because he finally healed enough to help someone else." Silence fell. Not heavy, not painful, warm, shared, real. Ranger lifted his head, scanning the tree line as if expecting something. Then he stood and walked toward Elias, placing his head against the man's hip. Elias rested a hand between his ears. "Good boy. You did this." Maya exhaled deeply. "You realize he's not just recovering anymore, he's leading." Elias nodded. "That's exactly what he's doing. In the distance, the Mountains stretched against the fading sky like a promise waiting to be kept. The fire crackled. The veterans talked. The dogs rested, some for the first time in years. And Ranger, the dog once feared, hunted, misunderstood, watched over them like an old guardian waking from a long sleep. Redwood Pass had changed him, and he had changed Redwood Pass. Not the symbol of danger, not the shadow of a past he couldn't outrun, but the legacy of something stronger than trauma, the legacy of trust reborn, of wounds shared and healed, of a German shepherd who refused to break, and the veteran who chose to stand with him. The community center of Redwood Pass had never been this full. Local ranchers, veterans from surrounding counties, reporters from Denver, and half the town gathered under the refurbished rafters of what used to be an abandoned ranger station. Now it carried a new name across its entrance. Veterans and Canine Recovery Project, Redwood Pass. Chapter inside, strings of soft lights hung overhead. Warm cider filled paper cups. A few dogs roamed gently among the chairs, each wearing a green vest with the program's emblem stitched on the side. But the one everyone looked for, the one whose story had reached beyond the mountains, lay quietly at the front of the room. Ranger. The German shepherd sat by Elias's side, as if carved from steady earth, head held high, eyes alert to every movement. Not out of fear, out of readiness, out of the calm confidence of a dog who had found his place. Maya adjusted the microphone on the podium and whispered to Elias, "They're ready." Elias nodded, though a flicker of nervousness moved across his face. It wasn't the crowd that unsettled him. It was being seen again after 12 years of hiding in the mountains, seen for who he was, not who he had been running from. He stepped forward. The room quieted. Ranger followed without being asked, keeping pace with him like a shadow made of muscle and loyalty. Elias cleared his throat. "Thank you all for being here. This program began because one dog refused to give up, even when the whole world misunderstood him." A reporter near the front raised her hand. "Mr. Ward, before you go further, may I ask the question everyone's waiting for?" Elias nodded. "Go ahead." She leaned forward, eyes soft with genuine curiosity. "Why did you keep Ranger with you through everything?" The room leaned in. Cameras lifted, microphones pointed. It was the kind of question that could be answered with simple facts. Duty, training, circumstance. But Elias didn't reach for simple answers. He rested a hand on Ranger's head, feeling the coarse fur beneath his palm, the steady rise and fall of breath, the grounding presence of a soul who had walked through hell and still found strength to lead others through it. His voice came quiet at first. He didn't just survive. He looked up, meeting the crowd's gaze. "He helped me survive myself." A hush rolled across the room. Even the dogs seemed to sense something sacred in the moment. Elias continued, voice steadier now. "For years I carried the weight of Ghost's death like a shadow I couldn't outrun. Ranger didn't erase that pain, but he taught me something I had forgotten. That healing is not about pretending the scars aren't there, it's about learning to live with them. Together." Ranger nuzzled Elias's hand, pressing close, as if confirming every word. Maya stepped beside them, adding softly, "This program exists because of what these two taught each other. A second chance can change a life. Sometimes it changes many." Alvarez, standing in the back of the room, nodded once, with respect, not authority. The room felt warm, layered with the breath of people who understood loss, combat, fear, and the long road back to themselves. Elias looked toward the open doors of the center. Outside, the early summer wind rustled through the pines. Ranger's ears twitched. He turned his head, staring into the tree line with the same quiet focus he'd had during the storm on the mountain. Elias smiled slightly. He still listens to the wind, as if the forest hasn't told its last story yet. A reporter beside the doorway asked, "Do you think his journey is finished?" Elias looked at Ranger, really looked, into eyes that once held the terror of old battles and now held the calm of a survivor who'd become a guide for others. "No," Elias said softly. "I think his journey just changed direction." Ranger lifted his head toward the mountains. A breeze passed through the doorway, carrying the scent of pine and cold river. For a moment, it seemed the world outside was calling him again, not with fear, but with possibility. Elias turned back to the cameras, voice firm but gentle. Stories like Ranger's, they remind us that loyalty has power, that healing can start in the unlikeliest places, and that sometimes a dog doesn't just change your life, he gives it back to you. He took a breath, then faced the crowd fully, eyes steady on the lens of the nearest camera. "What's your story with a loyal pet?" The question hung in the air, an invitation, a challenge, a doorway into the quiet, unseen battles everyone carries. People shifted. Faces softened. A few tears glimmered. Ranger stepped closer to Elias, leaning into his leg in silent solidarity. Elias smiled. "If this story touched you, if you believe in second chances, in the power of these dogs, in the healing they bring, then support this mission. Share it. Stand with us. And keep this project alive." He glanced lovingly at the shepherd beside him. "And don't forget to follow and support the German Shepherd channel, where stories like Ranger's keep finding their way home." Ranger barked once, loud and bright, as if sealing the moment with his own signature. The room erupted in applause. Outside, the wind moved again through the tall pines of Redwood Pass. Soft, knowing, endless, and Ranger watched it, ears forward, as though the mountains still held one more story waiting for him to uncover. The journey wasn't over. Not for him, not for Elias, not for anyone who believed in loyalty strong enough to outlive the past.